Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Jodi, Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, and I really appreciate you both being here. Amy, I know you from our neurodiverse peer professional group, where your colleague Laura Schreiner invited you to join us, and Laura's on another episode of this podcast series. I was really excited when you said you and Mike, your husband, wanted to be on this series. So why don't we start with if you guys would just be willing to share a little bit about yourselves and whatever you think's relevant.
My name's Amy, like you mentioned. I'm a therapist. I work with individuals in neurodiverse couples. I do not do couples work. And a big part of my interest is once my husband and I figured out that we were a neurodiverse couple, which we can talk a little bit about the journey there. And do you want to add something for yourself?
Oh, sure. Mike, I work in supply chain for a hospital system, and it's about 3 years ago that we figured out that I'm autistic. It had been quite a challenge getting there, though. Probably about 5 years of thinking that I had chronic depression and trying to steps to work on that and not getting any kind of relief really from it. It was Amy that had found out more about autism and has helped me figure out things about myself.
Thanks in part to our buddy Laura.
That's right. That's right.
And also one of our children was in the same process. So it sort of all worked together. You know, like so many couples with kids, it's like as you start figuring out one of the kids is autistic, it's like, this seems pretty familiar. Shall we look around the family?
I hear that all the time, and it's certainly been the case in my own family. And my daughter was the one that got us started. She's 22 now, and when she was 5, she was diagnosed with what was then called pervasive developmental disorder, which is now would be considered level 1 autistic. And since that time, we've realized that her brother's ADHD, I'm ADHD, which I didn't even realize until a couple years ago or so, which is crazy because I'm in this field, but that just goes to show how it's hard to spot sometimes, especially when you're living it and you're like so close to it. It's hard to see. But we've realized my mother's autistic, my grandmother, their dad, my children's father, my uncle. It's just, it started with, my daughter and her diagnosis and us learning more about it over time. So tell us a little bit more about that journey for you, because I think a lot of people are going to resonate with how you came to this discovery.
Sure. Probably before a few years ago, I don't think I really knew a thing about autism. Back then, it started out with trying to find mental health professionals like psychiatrists and therapists. As far as I knew, you treat depression with therapy and medication. And so we started trying a lot of different therapists and psychiatrists, and everyone said the same thing, that depression never brought up autism at all.
Can I interject?
Sure.
So I would say when we really started to just see that Mike was struggling and needed help was really when we had our first baby. Because prior to that, we had just sort of been very compatible and without intentionally doing this, had this setup that worked really well for both of us, but Mike in particular.
Right.
That we had different work shifts. So during the course of the week, we didn't see each other like that much. So Mike had plenty of like downtime and alone time to like engage in special interests. Because he worked second shift, like I would go out with friends and have my social time, things like that. And then on the weekend, we would just be inseparable. And also without putting effort into this is something that works well for us. You can't necessarily replicate it if it's not you. We're both homebodies. Like, we don't like being out in the world.
I don't either. I call it going out into the wild.
Yeah, exactly. So it just worked well. But he worked second shift. And so he'd get home like 11:30. We just let's hang out and chat a little bit and go to sleep. And on the weekends, you know, I mean, like we might go out to dinner, but we're not like, let's go clubbing. It's like, it just, I mean, it was so smooth. And I know even all my friends were like, you guys have like the least conflictual relationship.
Unintentionally had set up a lifestyle that really worked for me and my brain to get all the relaxation and alone time that I needed. Like aside from work, I was pretty much free to just pursue my own special interests and have all the time I needed to recharge. So yeah,
And then we
everything
had a
just seemed
baby.
right.
And I want to circle back to that conversation because I think what you're describing is so important as a part of how couples, what we need to look at in terms of how to structure our lives in order for the couple relationship to thrive, because you just described why and you understand why it was thriving. But then you add a child and a baby, and this is really common. And you probably see this in your practice as well. It's really common for autistic overwhelm and overload to really show up when that first baby arrives. And I know why, but I want you guys to describe it from your experience. What happened?
Well, there's a lot of factors. So one was that I had quit my full-time job and I ended up working part-time. But I mean, for me, all of a sudden my social needs were this little person who didn't talk and who cried at me a lot. So when Mike was home, I would be like desperate for connection. Like, hey, let's talk. What have you been doing? What's it like in the world? Mike, who previously had all this downtime, no more downtime, and, you know, a wife desperate to talk.
Yeah. All that alone time is now taking care of the baby, and yeah, we had
No more
our
special interest
schedules
time.
lining up so that we were home at the same time.
No more sleeping.
Yeah, very less sleep.
No more hot food. Mike really, and actually both of us, again, a compatibility thing. We both like routines, and like that was just like shattered. And so I think there's so much stress that got put into the system. And I mean, for the most part, you know, we're very happy. We have this nice baby. He's very cute. He's very fun to spend time with. But there is that like difficult adjustment period. And I think for Mike, that was really where all of a sudden he just kind of like had been fine. And then like, you know, treading water and then like drowning. And then there's kind of the, I don't want to speak for you, but I will, but there's guilt on top of it. Cause there's the sense of like, I should be the happiest I've ever been, which I just see with all new parents. It's like, no, but you're not, cause you're also stressed out and you don't sleep and you don't eat. Like you don't feel good anymore.
Not understanding why can't we do this? Like, why can't I have the social battery to take care of the kid and, you know, be around for Amy? That it just couldn't cut it.
There's this social expectation when we have a baby that it's such a joyful experience, and there is that piece of it.
Yes.
But there's a lot more to it. Just the exhaustion alone, the sleep deprivation alone can cause so many other issues for us. And that in and of itself reduces our executive functioning. So much is impacted just by the sleep. But then, like you said, there's also this huge adjustment where your needs were getting met, both of you. Maybe you've talked about your social needs, your interaction, even though you don't like going out in the world, you're more, it sounds more like a social introvert.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
I'm an ambivert when I've done the testing. So like I like people. I just like a certain amount, and I don't like quiet get-togethers with like one person.
Yeah. Ambivert. Yeah. I think I use that kind of interchangeably with social and introvert. Yeah. So all these things happen. And it sounds like, how long did it take before you started looking for some help?
I don't think it was too long. I think it was months.
Yeah, probably less than a year.
So you started going to providers, trying to get some help, recognizing I don't feel like the way I think I'm supposed to feel. I'm feeling a lot worse than I think I'm supposed to feel, and I don't know what to do with this. And so you went to providers who really just addressed it as depression, which is, we do have a lot of comorbidity, co-occurring depression with autism, but the providers are oftentimes very, very ill-equipped to recognize autism or even to consider it as a possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and I am a therapist, but I also like Mike said, I mean, I had the same training that most clinicians get about autism, which is to say nothing, that it's
Exactly.
just
I didn't
thing
know
that little white boys have, and it's a certain way, and that's like the only possibility.
Yeah.
So it did
Yes.
not cross my mind. I was also like, honey, I think you're depressed. You should see a therapist. And Mike, to his credit, was like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah, gave it
Yeah.
a shot. Unfortunately, and even the ones I saw, some of them I think might have been especially bad just on their own, not even considering autism. Like the first one I saw, he came late to all of them. And on at that one, he was asking me the same questions like the exact same questions he had already asked. And that was kind of confusing. Looking at his schedule, his computer laptop was facing me. I could see his schedule with all his other patients' names on it. But yeah, I pushed through and I had some other ones. Like I saw another guy that seemed really pleasant and helpful, but I think his style of therapy was to ask a question, then just let me talk. And that did not work for me at all. Like if someone asks me a question, like a lot of times I'm considering it like this is an exchange of information. I'm going to keep it brief and to the point, and you will have that information. And so if someone like at style asks me a question, I answer in a sentence or two, and then we just sit in silence for half an hour every session.
Yeah. And I want the therapists who are listening, because I do know that we have some therapists that follow the podcast or watch it on YouTube. I want you to take note of this, because therapy, we're very trained to ask those prompts, those prompting questions. And then the idea is we guide our clients to then self-reflect and let them kind of process and let their minds wander. But if you have a client who's responding the way that Mike is describing, where you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer, period.
Yep.
There's a
That's
clue
it.
there that maybe this is an autistic client, because talk therapy in the way the traditional type of talk therapy is just not useful. And that's why I transitioned over to coaching, solution-focused coaching, which is more directive and there's a lot more guidance given to clients versus just kind of being present with them as they kind of figure things out themselves. That type of therapy is not beneficial. Okay, so you went down this journey, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about how you got there, but I think it's relevant and I think it's important, because so many people are in various parts of this process of figuring it out themselves. So you mentioned Laura. How did you, and a child that was born, obviously, this child that was born, and was it your first child? How many children do you have?
We have 2.
Okay, all right. So this child started going through the process of evaluation. Talk to me a little bit about how you started recognizing some of these traits and realizing maybe Mike is autistic.
So with our son, there are some things that stood out, and I wasn't sure what they were, but it's like all the kids kind of parallel play, and then a lot of them grow out of it, and he was never really interested in growing out of it. Like he liked plays, but he liked to go play with other kids' toys very nicely. Zero interest in the other kids. And that didn't seem like unusual for a long time until, we had our second kid, and she grew out of that sooner, right? She would be playing with the other kids. So there's like stuff like that, and like preschool, kind of the same dynamic, like just not really interested in other kids, just wanted to kind of hang out and do his own thing, And then like he really had a lot of school anxiety, even in preschool, to the point where he was like barricading the door before we would like leave the house. So we kind of sensed something was going on. We didn't know what it was at that point in time. And so I think, like the pediatrician, and we did like PT for some sensory stuff, because she was like, well, it kind of looks like anxiety, but like with a 3-year-old, you're not going to do anxiety therapy, right? So like maybe try this. So, I mean, I think for a while we just had this sort of ambiguity that was like people in the household were struggling. And then talking to Laura at some point, she had shared that she had just gone through her own journey and was like, hey, I got a husband and a kid, they're autistic. And it like blew my mind, because I was like, whoa, like that's a thing that autistic looks like? Like I've met your husband, I've met your family. Like, so that was like kind of wild to me. And the idea of like, oh, a clinician can be married to like an autistic person and not realize it. So like, I think that just really opened this big door of things to like consider that I hadn't previously been looking at.
That in and of itself is just a strong statement that you just made. A clinician can be married to someone who's autistic and not know it. And that just speaks to the volumes of clinicians who aren't going to recognize autism, because if those of us who are trained, who are supposed to recognize it, don't recognize it in our partner, and then a lot of people don't recognize it themselves. The training is just not there for us to know how this presents and looks in adulthood, especially. We're getting better and better at recognizing it in children, but those children grow up and they become adults, and they become adults who have learned coping mechanisms or adapted, or their brains have developed beyond, developed different types of executive function capacities. So we just haven't really focused on what it looks like in adults until more recently. So, so when you started doing your research, both of you, or how did you bring it up to Mike? And, how did you go about that process?
Yeah, that's a fun question. I talk about that with clients a lot because, when one partner suspects, it's like, oh, is this like rude to bring up? Like, I don't know. I waited for a fruitful moment, which is kind of how I do things. I sort of was chewing on it. And then there was one night that Mike was really struggling with, some kind of burnout, sensory overload. And he had voiced something like, I just don't know why this keeps happening, or, something like that. Like, I don't know why I'm like this. And I like sat down and I'm like, so I have a theory. So that was kind of it, is that I'd sort of waited. And I think at that point, our son had maybe already been diagnosed, or at least we were in the process. And so it wasn't like as shocking and out of the blue. And so Mike took it serious and kind of chewed on it. And I think he had an appointment with therapist or psychiatrist coming up in the next week. And I'll let you describe that, because they were not great.
Like, what was it like to hear this? What was that like for you?
Yeah. When she brought it up, I was, kind of considered it, but I didn't really know too much about it. And it's like, I don't have this like strange condition that, I don't know much about and I've only seen in kids and that kind of thing. So I was like confused, but I said, yeah, definitely I'll bring it up. And I think it was my psychiatrist had an appointment. When I brought it up, he said, well, I can tell that you can make eye contact, so you can't be autistic. And that was it. Like, basically, like, just wrote it off because of that.
Well, also he had said you have empathy.
And I had another appointment and brought it up again, and same thing. It was like, but this time it was, when we've talked, I can tell that you show empathy. So definitely you can't be autistic, because from what he knew, autistic people can't make good eye contact and don't have empathy, because it was based on very old medical writing or something. So that set me back, as it was just like, well, I mean, that's the doctor, he would know. Like, I guess that's not it. So kept going for a little while longer, until it was about 3 years ago. Our relationship was in a bit of trouble. We looked into marriage counseling.
Not a neurodiverse person, just
right,
a person.
Just regular. And at one point during a session, the counselor said something like, if you don't change, your wife is going to leave you, like just straight up like that, like real blunt. Because then I said, okay, I'm going to take, this autism seriously. And it was about 3 years ago, over a weekend, I think around New Year's, maybe, I just like watched every video on YouTube, every article I could find, like mostly autistic people sharing their experience, describing what it's like. So much of it connected. It was like this huge epiphany. It all made sense. So much of my past, and so many times that was confused about something socially or accidentally offended people, like stuff came together. And so I was like, yeah, this is it. I did actually go for an official assessment. We knew what day the results were going to come in. So Amy had prepared a celebration for me.
Just with like our family, made a cake.
Yeah, we're going to have a cake and take pictures and just have a little celebration at home.
Did the same thing for our kid, by the way.
And when the results came in and we opened them, it was for schizoid personality disorder. And so then I was like, oh, what is that? Go and look it up, and like, some of this stuff kind of made sense. So I was like, oh, I guess maybe it's this. This doctor is saying not autism. So I kind of put a damper on our celebration. But then, just looking at it more and talking, just like we knew that was not a good diagnosis.
I made a firm case where that was a really stupid diagnosis. So we still went forward with our neurodiversity celebration. But it really took the wind out of Mike's sails.
I was just talking to another colleague last week about that diagnosis, schizoid personality. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that most people who are diagnosed with schizoid personality are probably autistic, but that the training is not out there. The education is not out there about what autistic and adults, how they present. And what happened to you is exactly why I've said many times in my videos and on my podcast when people ask about diagnosis, I don't necessarily recommend that you go for an evaluation. The psychologists who do know what they're doing, you can get a good evaluation from them, but they can only practice where they're licensed, in the state that they're licensed. This story that you're telling is so representative of how it goes for so many people. And it's so hard. Like you had several providers tell you, no, this is not autism. People who are credentialed and licensed and are supposed to know what they're doing. And for an autistic brain, that's hard because that's like, no, this person's got training and credentials and they're saying, no, this is not autism. So I want to just commend you both for going with what you were also learning elsewhere. And that's why I'm out there doing these podcasts. Mona Kay's got her podcast. There are others out there that we're trying to help educate, to help people learn that you can recognize this yourself, even if providers are telling you, no, that's not what this is. And you make sure you pay attention to the sources. Lots of people are out there on the internet talking about it. Make sure you're listening to people who do know what they're talking about. But it's really devastating when people go and try to get clarity and they're told, nope, that's not what this is. And it's so frustrating. So let's move on then, because you guys tried to get the formal diagnosis. You said, okay, you know what? We're going to reject that. And then you decided to go ahead with your own understanding of this. And how did that talk me through what changed then, or what happened? How did that change your marriage? In what ways? What insights did it give you?
Well, it worked a lot better if the issue is autism to actually be working with autism than depression, right? Just having the clear understanding, like a real watershed moment. Like Mike can probably talk more about some of the things that he changed that he'd been trying to do.
Right. Like depression, they say that you should spend time with family and friends. You're autistic and you're burned out. Spending time with people actually is worse, because what you need is the less sensory input you can get, the better to kind of relieve it. We definitely changed our routine a bit. We're now an afternoon after school for the kids, after work. We just all kind of have some downtime. We all do our own thing, quiet, whatever we want to do for an hour or two. That's helped a lot.
So you've adjusted even your family routine based on what your updated understanding. And I think that's a real valid one you made about depression, because the idea of when you're depressed is that you don't have that motivation, that initiation to spend time with others. But when you do, you get the dopamine and serotonin released in your brain that helps lift you, which is good advice for someone who's depressed. But like you said, if you're autistic and it's not about that, it's more about burnout and needing that recharge the battery time, then it's literally making the problem worse. So you saw that.
Yeah, we had some communication adjustments, so things work well for us, that we do now. If Mike has the social battery after work, he will make the effort to connect with me, and that's great because I really like connecting. But if he doesn't, I'm not offended. It's fine. He can go. He has a recliner in the corner he likes to sit in, listen to music. And it's fine. It makes the big difference when there isn't that feeling of like rejection, or that feeling of like, why don't you want to talk to me? I haven't seen you all day. That he will say hi. But if he's like feeling burnout, now we know what it is. So we have the language for it. And he's gotten a lot more aware of burnout, because it used to be, we thought it was depression, but days before he would even know it was there, I would recognize it was setting in. And I'd be like, do you think you're depressed right now? And he'd be like, nah, I think I'm fine. And then 2 days later, he'd be like, I think depressed. And I'd be like, yes. But now, he knows, and he has a scale. Like at some point I got a little battery. So it's like a social battery with lighter. It's a little bit of a gag gift, but also it was pretty helpful. So I could put it on when he got home, and he'd like put the battery where it was at. And so then, if it was like in the yellow, be like, okay, hey, like, see you later. Talk to you at dinner. If in the green, he'd come and sit with me. We'd have a little together.
I love that, actually. I love it. I love it. I love it. Where did you get it?
Etsy.
Okay. Everybody, it's out there. I love that idea, because I know, like with my own daughter, when she gets up in the morning, she's in college now, but when she's home, when she first gets up, and I say morning loosely because sometimes it's 1 PM, but anyway, when she gets out of bed, she's usually nonverbal. Now, this is a 21-year-old college student who's got mostly A's and B's. So it's not about being verbal is not about intelligence, but it's about her brain waking up and her brain being ready to process language. And so when she comes downstairs and she's there, sometimes I'll speak to her and she just kind of ignores me. And I want to go back to what you said, Amy, about the meaning that we assign to what we're perceiving. And that's where the hurt comes from. It's not the behavior itself. It's the meaning we assign to it, how we're interpreting it. And so for you previously, Amy, you had interpreted some of the disengagement from Mike as rejection, as shut out versus shut down, which an autistic person is shutting down. They're not intentionally shutting you out. It's just more of my body is powering down. And so understanding that and knowing that makes a huge difference, because then we realize it's not personal. It's not about me. And like with my own daughter, if she's not interacting with me, there was a time in her life when I would think, she's being rude, she's being disrespectful, and I'd get mad as a parent and be like, don't you, but now I understand, and I'm able to say, are you still nonverbal? And she's learned to just either give me a thumbs up or just kind of nod. I'm like, I actually got her a mug that says words are out of service until the coffee or something like that. It's like, we're just not in service yet. And so I just, I leave her alone because she's not able to receive what I have to say or communicate back. And it's has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, Mike is also not in the morning, for a fun fact. Yep. But our schedules are different now. He works first shift, so he up and kind of has breakfast and leaves the house. I see him for like a minute before he goes.
Yeah, I've been up for at least an hour before Amy gets up, so I have that time where I can kind of ease into the day. And before that, it was just like runs until coffee probably.
But now we understand these differences too, which is really helpful, and so we can laugh at them. So if there is a morning that I'm up with Mike first thing and sitting here chatting away because my eyes are open, I'm ready to chat, and catch myself as he's trying gamely to kind of be like, okay, and then I'm like, oh, don't you love when I talk at you this much in the morning? And we just have a little laugh about it. And
I love that humor. So let's talk about that for a second, because we use humor a lot in our family too, and we're able to laugh at ourselves, even roast each other a little bit. Like now, once I realized I was ADHD, and my son is too, I'm constantly sending him memes that I'm like, oh my God, this is so relatable. And, we're just kind of laughing at ourselves. And my daughter, there's this misnomer that autistics don't have a sense of humor. Well, she definitely does. But it's all about safety and knowing that you're not mocking someone, you're not making fun of them, and you're not criticizing and ridiculing them when you laugh, especially when we remember to laugh at ourselves too. Okay, we're going to stop there for part 1 of my chat with Amy and Mike, which has already been incredible, as you can see. So be sure and tune in 2 weeks for part 2 of their conversation with me. That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time.